and this is Alicia Stella, and she does have a channel on YouTube called Orlando Park Stop. So definitely go and check that out on YouTube. Again, it's Orlando Park Stop, and she's going to talk a little bit about that. But in this interview, we're going to go a lot about into Universal in general and stuff like that, and stuff that I want to talk about that I really grew up with and what her opinion on it is in general. So Alicia, thanks so much for coming on the program. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so can we talk, and I guess I should say, can you tell the viewers that don't know you a little bit about your YouTube channel, Orlando Park Stop?
The website is orlandoparkstop.com.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And the YouTube's actually Theme Park Stop, because on the YouTube, we talk a little more broadly about parks around the world. But on the website, I mostly just blog about Orlando parks because I don't have time to blog about everything, but I am fascinated by the parks around the world. So if I had given more time, I would do videos about everything. But on the channel, we talk about a lot about rumors and upcoming things, especially for Universal, because they're building a lot. So, new theme parks in Beijing and Orlando, new rides, Super Nintendo World. We talked a lot about Hagrid and even King Kong, Skull Island back in the day, kind of where I started posting videos onto the YouTube. So it's all about the rumors, construction updates, and then we've been talking about the past a little bit and projects that were canceled, which is in this day and age when the future is uncertain, it's interesting to go back and look at all the things that were canceled due to various reasons, because there may be some parallels to what's going on right about now. So I've been doing that lately too on the channel.
But when did you say, hey, I need to develop a website and also do this YouTube channel where I cover these things that, people that just do these regular podcasts about Universal and Disney don't really cover these things, such as what you cover on your website and in general on the YouTube channel?
I used to have a blog that was just like my personal blog, and I would talk about movies and things. And I visit the theme parks a lot. I was going to Universal almost every week just because I was living nearby. It was convenient. It's the only exercise I get. And while I was there, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do some articles about the construction for Skull Island. Well before it was ever announced. Of course, it wasn't announced till like 2 months before it opened. So I found that not too many people were doing construction updates, and I started doing video updates and things like that. And I kind of fell into it. I really enjoyed it. But then I also really like the rumor side of it and the research side and looking up permits. So I find that Disney is very well covered. And so I've kind of found a little niche here. I love covering Disney, but I'm always like way too late by the time I start talking about it. But with Universal, I seem to be the first one talking about something half the time. So that's kind of where I've fallen into. I turned it into my own website because at a certain point, the blog was nothing but theme park stuff. And I was like, okay, maybe we should just move this to its own actual theme park based website, renamed the channel, which was just my name. And now it's Theme Park Stop. So, yeah, I love covering the theme parks. I love going to the theme parks. And even if I wasn't talking about it to everyone, I'm always talking about it to my friends.
Can you talk about those 30 years and kind of obviously you can't talk about everything. We'd be here for 10 hours, but in a brief synopsis about those great 30 years of Universal Orlando and how it's changed. And I remember going into the theme park when I was really small, when they didn't even have City Walk, when it was just Universal Studios, and they just had, that one park. So can you discuss with the viewers a little bit about that history and how Universal Orlando's really evolved in the past 30 years?
When Universal Studios Florida opened in June of 1990, it was an evolution of the tram tour in Hollywood. They had taken segments from the tram tour. Like over the last 30, 40 years, the tram tour had become, here's a movie being made and look at these movie sets, to also in between, let's do this little attraction. And people are like, that's almost like a theme park. And it almost was. And when they did King Kong on the tram tour, it was like, oh, now this is a theme park. So the inspiration for Universal Studios Florida was make it actually a theme park. And you got Confrontation, Jaws, Earthquake. These were segments of the tram tour that they turned into fully fledged out, rides. And they really wanted to compete with Disney. They wanted to say, like, we could do dark rides, we can do boat rides, we can do storytelling, but we're going to give it a little edge. We're not cutesy pie. We're going to blast you with fire. We're going to say some curse words. And it was definitely a niche park where they're trying to cater to the older demographic. Like when Michael Eisner came in around the same time, he was trying to also cater to an older demographic because Disney World was just seen as a little kid place. And then when you grew up, maybe you'd go to Universal. So we got the Alien Encounter and we got Star Tours. And
Alien Encounter was a hell of a ride, by the way.
Ride. Yeah, so show experience with binaural audio.
Whatever you want to call it, right?
If you have a good pair of headphones, you can find the audio and just close your eyes. It's like the same thing. Just spritz water in your face. Yeah, the idea was, we got this perfect niche, but we're really just an add-on for people going to Disney. So 1991, they all sat around the table, the executives at Universal, and like, okay, what's our second park going to be? And they were going to really compete with Disney, do something with it for a younger demographic, and eventually became Islands of Adventure, which now is a thrill park. Like, I don't think that was their original intention. They were more trying to do like a Magic Kingdom park, but in another way, they're now like doubling down on the roller coasters and capturing another element that Disney really isn't gathering. So like just really finding their niche, and they've got the Volcano Bay and the City Walk. So they've gone from that 1 day add-on to, now it's almost like a 3-day. It's a 3-day destination. They want to maybe open Epic Universe, make it a full week destination, sell those park hopper passes, like Disney does. And in the middle of all this, they did get the rights to Harry Potter. And that was a game changer. And while you might think of it as the downfall of the Universal Studios parks, because it all moved to screens and we lost a lot of the classics, Universal internally is thinking of it as the rebranding and the stealing of Disney's demographic. Because King Kong, based on 1930s movie that was remade in the 70s, is not, and then even remade in 2000, whatever. It's just the Confrontation ride itself was based on the tram tour. It already felt 30 years old when it opened. Jaws, 1975 movie. I mean, it's a classic ride, but it just felt like Universal Studios Florida needed to be re-envisioned. It needed to be updated. Harry Potter breathed life into it, and it brought in a demographic. People, still to this day, it's like, I never would have thought to go to Universal Studios Florida, but when they opened Diagon Alley, I had to go. And it changed the way that they look at the business, and nothing was sacred. Of course, Back to the Future, when we reached 2015, they're like, maybe we should just close this, and we'll put something, flashy and modern that's more family friendly in here. They surprisingly, Men in Black is still there. Let's keep that, please. But yeah, nothing is sacred when it comes to them because they're looking at it as a business. Whereas Disney has a tendency to look at it as Walt's legacy. They might tear down the production tour at MGM Studios and build Star Wars because that wasn't built by Walt. But there's no way It's a Small World is going to go anywhere. There's no way Jungle Cruise is going to go anywhere. These things are tied to a personal, like a person, to a mythic person, a legacy. And not only does Disney World have the room to keep things and expand, but they also have the history, and people respect the history more than the ride in a way. Like Peter Pan's flight is kind of lame. I'm going to just say it. It's kind of lame, but the magic of it and being able to take your kids, it's like we're 3 generations, 4 generations deep on people taking their kids on this ride every, 10, 15 years since it was originally built. And it's part of the history of Disney. In Universal's, like, the opposite, where the history of Universal to them feels dull and old, and King Kong, they bring it back in a new flashy way. They're not going to keep Kongfrontation around forever. Plus, it costs a lot of money to do that explosion on Kong and Jaws. Just a ton of money. You have no idea how much money every time they blew up that gas station on Jaws. It cost extra to have a spieler. So there was an evolution and a change the way Universal does the parks. And a lot of the, people that went in the 90s, I went in 1990, in like August, right after they finally got some of the rides to work. And I remember being so upset because there was a countdown clock to Back to the Future. And it's like, oh, join us again next year. And it's like, no, it was in the commercials. Don't do this to me. The 1993 is like the sweet spot for me. That's my favorite Universal Studios Florida. But at the same time, as much as I love Jaws, I think Diagon Alley was a good change. I like just walking around the area. I think they're selling food and stuff. They couldn't even get a little cart of Jaws merchandise to move. And yet now they have, 15 stores and restaurants in this little city, and they're all selling. So, what would you do if you were a business?
No, I hear you. And I definitely want to get into that. I know you went into quite a few different things. You hit on some great points. Actually,
that was 30 years. You told me to do 30 years.
Yeah,
that was 30 years.
You feel like Universal did well in their 30 years of business, and what do you think they could have done better?
It's funny. Is it sitting right here? I have a book. There's something that we're missing nowadays that there used to be, and that's J-Bangs. Jay Stein would walk into a ride that was about to open, like Back to the Future, and he would ride it, and he'd get off the ride and he'd say, it's great, but listen, can we bump it up about 15% more? And they're like, but it won't match the screen. And it's like, I don't care if it matches the screen. I want this to pop. I want people to be thrashed around. I want them to get off this ride and go, whoa, that was an adventure. We have something like Jimmy Fallon now, and it's so smooth, you almost don't notice you're moving for most of the attraction. The only time I ever notice it's really moving is when Jimmy Fallon kicks off on the moon. He kicks off on the railing and it like bumps, and I'm like, whoa. If Jay Stein were around these days, he would be on that ride and he'd be like, listen, this is fine, but we need to like ramp it up because I don't feel like I'm flying through New York. It's not wild enough. The screen elements are there. Like that splash with the little shark scene, soak the audience. Come on, let's do this right. And I feel like we're missing that. We're missing a lot of the pacing on something like Gringotts is way off. If you go on Spider-Man, the pacing is spot on. It's got the right like lull in the middle. It's got all the action-packed ending. You go in Gringotts and it's just stop, go. And it's supposed to be like this fast roller coaster attraction like in the movie. And so we've got some pacing issues. We got some things that aren't pumped up enough. They're doing great with the immersiveness of the lands, but I feel like they're losing a little bit on the fun and rewritability of the attractions.
So I assume that with all this being said, you prefer Universal now compared to the 90s and 2000s, correct?
It's weird. I love change, and I love watching the evolution of theme parks. Mm-hmm. So I don't mind change. There's very little that I think the Wild West stunt show is one I will never forgive them for losing for something such a demotion to the show that I won't even say the name of. And on the other hand, like I love Diagon Alley. I love Hogsmeade. Dueling Dragons, the first roller coaster I ever went on. Love that ride. Once it stopped dueling, I don't care anymore. Tear it down. Put something else there. Love Hagrid. And that's kind of the way I am. But at the same time, like I do love 1990s Universal, and I have a soft spot for it. But there was no line to get on Kongfrontation when it closed to replace it with the Mummy. And there's a line for the Mummy still. So they're doing something right.
Now, is it true, since you brought up the Confrontation and the Mummy rather, is it true that inside the Mummy they still have a lot of the track vehicles from Confrontation? They still have the animatraction of King Kong in there?
No, there's some track because it's suspended from the ceiling. There's some track that was built into the building itself. And if they remove the track, they'd have to rebuild the roof. So they just left it. It's like 2 stories above the track for the Mummy, so it doesn't affect anything. But there is definitely some load-bearing leftover Roosevelt Island track supports all along the roof of that building.
I asked that because there was somebody I had watched on YouTube or something, and they said that place is so big inside that
Mhm.
they have like a warehouse in there. Is that so? That is not true either.
Half of the first half of that attraction still has 2 stories of empty space above it that is
Oh, wow.
underutilized or completely unutilized. There were supposed to be 2 extra scenes on the ride that they ended up cutting for budget reasons. Um, so what we have today is not, it's only utilizing like 2/3 tops of the building because Confrontation was so massive. Well, most of the attraction was taking place up on like an upper level. You could look over the edge and see like city streets down below you. So it was just 4 stories of massiveness.
Right. But why do you feel like Universal's kind of went away from building these attractions, such as, the attractions that you worked on, such as Confrontation, and you worked on Jaws and stuff. I know Jaws, the expensive part of that, with, as you said, with the gas and
Well,
stuff.
not just that, but anything in water has its issues. I don't know how after making the Jaws movie, they thought the shark was going to work on a Jaws ride year round. It's funny. I'll pose it like this.
Yeah.
The business model for the Universal Studios Hollywood theme park has always been, we have this tram tour, it's the main attraction, or at least it was up until Potter, essentially. And every 5 or so years, they replace or update a section of the tram tour. And they have to bring in new people. And it's like, we have a new special effect. There's a new cascading waterfall. There's a boulder. There's a train coming at you. Like, we're going to do something new every 5-10 years. And they do a big one every 10 years or so. And those became the inspiration for the original rides at Universal Studios Florida. They swap out the King Kong encounter for Kong 360 over at the tram tour. What do? They bring Kong 360 here. They, get rid of one of their things and they put in Fast and Furious over there. What do? They bring Fast and Furious over here. In a strange way, the business model never changed. It's just that the rides got worse.
Yeah.
Like they only got rid of King Kong because it burned down. Like, it wasn't by choice. It was their favorite thing over there. It was like their Peter Pan, and they were probably going to keep it. But when it burned down, it's not like that was like, it's not like ours, where ours is its own standalone building and no one was riding it. Everyone's still riding the tram tour. And it's just one little scene. Like, they still have Earthquake, it's not taking up the real estate that that Disaster was here. So in some strange way, they're still doing what they've always done. And it's just their point of view that, like, new, flashy brings in new customers. And Disney does that too, but they also have 4 parks in Orlando to do it at.
About Jaws, we hear and researching Jaws, going on Jaws so many times, talking to people that when I was there, when I was smaller and a lot even younger, we hear all these stories of when, and you talked about it a little bit earlier on in the interview, when the ride opened, Jaws was not functioning. It went down. It was down for quite a long time. For almost, and you can correct me as far as time period, I think it was close to a year or 2 years that they shut down. Is that correct? Or am I 3 years? Okay, it's close. Anyways, with that shutting,
2.5.
yeah, with that shutting down, Alicia, and I know that they said the ride was a lot more scary and they kind of dumbed it down a little bit. Well, what is your opinion on all that? And
I don't know if it was more scary. It was definitely different. I think it's
how
actually
so?
kind of boring. Instead of the explosion scene,
Yeah.
Jaws would come up out of the water, bite the boat, and tug it like 10 feet back. And you'd be like, whoa, he's got us. He's got the boat. But it would be off time always. So the Jaws would bite the boat, supposedly, and the boat would move at opposite times. And they couldn't get it right. And they just, like, it was always broken. And every time it got brokener and brokener, they had to stop the ride and reset and reset. And that became the explosion, which is just a simple, like, it's so effective because, like, shark comes up, boom, explosion. Like, everyone feels the heat. That's one of those things. That's a J-Bang, by the way, where he got on the ride and he's like, increase the fire until it burns me. And they're like, all right, what about this, Jay? More. What about this, Jay? One more. Ow, this hurts. Okay, right below that. It's just below where it burns you. And people would still like report it. They're like, I got burned on the Jaws ride. And it's like, no, it's not possible, but we want you to think that you are. And then the ending, instead of the electric wire and Jaws getting electrocuted, which is inspired by Jaws 2, the original ending was inspired by Jaws 1, where you shoot him and he explodes. And there would be a blood effect and guts that would literally go all over the boat, all over the ground, all over the water. And then the guts would be like, go back into a sucking up system under the water and reset for the next one. The Hollywood Tram Tour still to this day has a blood effect where a diver gets pulled under and then the water turns red. So they were used to the blood effect already. Unfortunately, ducks would be swimming along and then duck would go flying. And then they'd lose pieces that would fall on the dock and not go back into the system. And you'd go by and there'd be guts on the dock. And it was very ambitious, but not repeatable. So it didn't always work. So I wouldn't say the original was scarier, and there was not much. The whole front half of the ride was the same. The fins are even the exact same ones, I believe, for the first part of the ride. In the sinking boat, all that stuff was the same. The boathouse was improved upon a little bit with some more effects and things, but just those last two scenes were changed to make it repeatable, and I thought it was better. I of course, then again, when I went there after the summer of 1990, it had already closed, and there was a sign that said, "Sorry, Jaws is broken forever. Maybe it'll open next year." Like they thought they were going to open in a year, but it wasn't until 1993 that it reopened, I believe.
So did anybody do anything crazy? I heard a story on YouTube that someone fell in the water and the shark kind of went after them. I don't know if you heard that too. Maybe that's false. Maybe somebody just made that
The
up.
shark can't go anywhere that it's not on the track.
Well,
So-
maybe the person, I don't know what the whole story was, but apparently the person fell in the water. Maybe the shark they fell on the track. I don't know. Maybe that was false. But when you were skipper, did you see anything crazy happen, or people act stupid, maybe fall in or put their hands in the water and do something stupid?
I had a kid jump out of my boat once. Oh no.
Wow.
Did we lose internet?
Into
Yeah,
the water?
No, he started
Oh.
to jump out of the boat, and the parents grabbed him and held down. And then as we went forward, right before the explosion scene, there's a dock, which is like an evacuation or access dock. And as soon as that dock came up, I'm seeing out of the corner of my eye, I'm like, that kid's going to go for the dock. That kid's going to go for the dock. Kid went for the dock. I had to hit the E-stop. And it stopped the whole ride, and everyone was mad at me all day. And I'm like, the kid was jumping out of the boat right before the explosion. If he ran onto the island, he could be blown up. Like, what am I supposed to do? That's why we have the button. The button stops the ride so no one gets blown up. But that was the craziest thing I ever saw. For the most part, it was mostly boring. Supposedly on your last day, they push you in the water, but I didn't tell anyone I was leaving the attraction when I left because I didn't want to go in that water.
Yeah, that water's going to be disgusting with all.
You can see the oil slick on top from all the hydraulic fluid that just leaks into it.
And I was looking at, because I know that Jungle Cruise went down this year and it started to sink the boat.
You mean like went down? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh God, if somebody ever went fully down in that water, how disgusting, and people spitting and all the
that water's gross. That water's gross because it has a dye in it. And the dye is incredibly strong, especially after they first do it. It's like such a high amount of the dye to make it so you can't see through the water that it's poison. So don't drink the water on Jungle Cruise. But the water at Jaws was, they actually chlorinated it. Like the day after it chlorinated, it was crazy. There'd be foam and fuzz everywhere from all like the mister effects or the splashes from the shark. It'd be like bubble bath next to the shark. But yeah, it's just the hydraulic fluid was constantly leaking. And whenever it was broke down, the divers had to go down. Most of the ride was like 10 feet deep. But whenever it was a shark segment, it was like 30 or more feet deep for like the shark pit where the mechanics and the divers would have to go down to fix it. And whenever they went and did that and you undo something, just all the hydraulic fluid goes to the surface and mixes into the water.
But did you have control of that boat, or was that on a track, or did you have to fully turn it?
Absolutely no control on Jaws. You press a button at the beginning and it goes burr, 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 and everything else happens on its own. But on Jungle Cruise, while the steering wheel is not real, the throttle is. On Jungle
Oh,
Cruise, you have, you know, full throttle, full speed, and you have a medium speed, and then you have an idle, and it is a very real throttle. So like if you want to really tell a lot of jokes, you could do medium throttle and just like hold people in the scene longer. But if you held it at full throttle and weren't looking ahead, like if you keep looking at the audience and you're not looking forward, you will bump the boat in front of you.
oh,
So
wow.
it's a very real throttle, and it still is to this day. And I was like, don't give me this responsibility. don't don't let me drive a real boat. The Jaws boats could never sink because they were on a motion gimbal that
Oh,
runs on a track, and like it's like not possible for them to sink because there's nowhere to go. They're not buoyant. They rely on the track system. They would work even without the water in Jaws, whereas the Jungle Cruise boats are just tethered. They're real floating objects, and they just have like a tether at the base that keeps them in the track. That's why when you're on the Jungle Cruise, you'll feel it like keep
right.
hitting something. It's the guide rail underneath you, whereas Jaws almost felt like you were perfectly gliding always.
It seems like all these new attractions are being phased in and out at Universal Studios, and Islands of Adventure doesn't get as much love as maybe they deserve. You know, it used to be a great park. I enjoy going there. I went there quite a few times within the past couple of years, more so than Universal Studios. With that said, what is your opinion on that as far as an upgrade for Islands of Adventure for rides?
I find it hypocritical that you say Universal is getting so much love and yet you hate all the new rides. Do you really want them to go into Islands of Adventure and start ripping out good things and putting out lesser
That's
good things?
true. Good point.
Yeah, you gotta be careful what you wish for. No, Islands of Adventure, besides being newer, is
Yeah.
something that was built more immersive and is more in line with today's standards of what theme parks are. Universal Studios Florida is still a studio park, and it's still easy enough to swap out a box building. Like this just is a box building. You can change out whatever's inside it and then redo the facade, and it's fine. Islands of Adventure, you have entirely immersive lands and worlds, and even what's left of Lost Continent is so highly themed that it's not like you can't just re-theme Mythos to something else. You'd have to completely tear it down and start over. Um,
Hmm.
Even for Hogsmeade, they tried to keep the one restaurant that was in there, and they kept the roller coaster, but it ended up costing them more to reutilize the exact existing kitchen for 3 broomsticks than just start over, which is a problem Disney's seeing right now with Universe of Energy. It would have been cheaper to rebuild that building from scratch, exactly the way it was shaped, than to reuse it the way that they are, because it's just old. So, you know, you want to redo Toon Lagoon, you have 2 of the highest rated water rides in the world. Why would you want to redo that? You want to redo Lost Continent. Well, we already Lost Continent, half of it to Hogsmeade. There's not much left, and there's not enough room really to put a massive attraction because it's just a little indoor show and a little outdoor theater. So it's so much money for not enough payoff. They have to really have a good idea and be ready to do a whole land, not just a little one ride, like a
Hmm.
Hogsmeade type size project. And you know, there's been rumors of maybe Lord of the Rings taking over Toon Lagoon or something, but you have to really commit to this. This is like a huge section of the park
You think
that
that would be a good idea if they did that?
I don't think it would be worth it for the payoff. If we're going to get a expanded water ride as the Lord of the Rings attraction, it's going to be not what everyone wants from Lord of the Rings,
Hmm.
because everyone wants different things. And there's so much story to tell that almost needs its own theme park. And to try to convert something existing rather than build something from scratch, I'd rather them use the massive expansion for Epic Universe to do something from scratch. Personally, I like Toon Lagoon. I think there's an amphitheater area in Comic Strip Lane that could be turned into another land, the way that they did Skull Island in the corner of Jurassic Park. You could bring in a Secret Life of Pets. You can bring in SpongeBob SquarePants, Bikini Bottom. There's enough room there for a massive e-ticket ride and retheme the cafe and the stores, and then keep Dudley Do Right and Popeye as Toon Lagoon. And that's what I'd rather see. And that would be more economical because they're not using that theater, and they can keep the restaurant and the stores in the same place. So something like that makes more sense. And they've been doing that. They took down the Triceratops encounter area and put up a new coaster in Jurassic Park. They just redid Dueling Dragons, which was at the end of its life because it had serious problems. Not to mention it didn't duel anymore. So what was the point of even having it? So I disagree with Lee. I don't think that it's not getting any love. I think that it's constantly seen updates since Harry Potter came in. It's such a big, it's like moving a mountain when it comes to this park. It's
Right.
not just swapping out what's in this one box building. It is retheming an entire area, an immersive area. And they have to, like, to do the Jurassic Park coaster, they're having to move walkways around, and they're having to redo the lagoon area. And it's just a lot of work. Whereas Universal Studios Florida, it's like, keep the building, gut it, put in a new ride.
Can you talk about, now you do have the 2 posters behind you for Jurassic Park.
What?
Obviously, we know what's going on now with Jurassic Park. For the people that don't know, as far as what's going on in Islands of Adventure with that, can you tell them, and any updates on that?
They're building a massive roller coaster. They tore down Dragon Challenge, Dueling Dragons, and they put the Hagrid ride there, which is, it's an exciting ride and it goes fast, but it's not like a thrill coaster the way that thrill coaster enthusiasts like Dueling Dragons was. So this is kind of a way to satiate the really big coaster fans. It's also a way to compete with the SeaWorld and Busch Gardens of Florida, because we don't have like the Six Flags or Cedar Fairs here. So SeaWorld's kind of been taking it upon themselves, in Orlando at least, to do the bigger coasters. We have the like a hyper coaster of Mako. And now this one is it's a serious contender for best coaster in the state. A lot of people were so excited about Iron Gwazi RMC hybrid coaster at Busch Gardens opening soon. And then they're seeing this one over in Islands of Adventure, and they're like, oh, this might be the best coaster in Florida. So it's like 2 great coasters showing up around the same time. It's being built in what was unused space. No one was really going down to the waterfront in front of the Discovery Center in Jurassic Park, and they closed the Triceratops encounter almost a decade ago, which was only running seasonal for the last 5 years anyway. So it was barely used, and then it was never used, and it was just rotting. So they cleared that land, and they built a coaster on it, and it should be opening next year. And with it might come a retheme from Jurassic Park to Jurassic World, from that one to that one. The Raptor encounter just opened last week with the reopening of the theme parks, and the Spiel recording says, "Here at Jurassic World, our raptors are kept blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, oh no, it started. So while the land hasn't completely rethemed, I think we're going to see, Raptor encounter is Jurassic World, new roller coaster will be Jurassic World. Then next thing you know, maybe they close the River Adventure and turn that into Jurassic World, and then all the signs get changed to blue and it's Jurassic World. It's just a, several year process.
Is that a positive for you or a negative?
I mean, I really like the score. Giacchino, you're doing a great job. Love the score. So when I look at POV videos for Jurassic World the ride, I'm like, hey, this feels like Jurassic World because it's got the music playing. And I like that. But we'll see when they update it. Like, they're working on adding more dinosaurs to Jurassic World the ride. They didn't finish in time. So again, I love change in theme parks, even when it's not for the better. I love Jurassic Park, but at the same time, and this is my personal view, River Adventure never really felt like the Jurassic Park movie. It has its own kind of style. It has its own thing. It's not recreating anything from the movies. Even the one in Hollywood had the Explorer falling down, which felt a little bit like it was from the movie. Ours has nothing from the movie. The Ultrasaurs in the lagoon with the weird broken neck, there's no Ultrasaurs in any Jurassic Park movie. Who do I care? The only thing I care about is Richard Kiley in the voiceover, spared no expense. Other than that, it might as well just be, generic dinosaur attraction with good music. So I don't mind.
Alicia, I want to talk about this. Now, you did work at Universal, you said, for 3 years, correct?
Just about, yeah.
Okay, and with that, you did work on a lot of those old rides, Back to the Future, Confrontation, and Jaws. With that said, what was your favorite ride that you worked on, and why? And any secrets you can tell us about those classic rides that you worked on?
I think Jaws was definitely my favorite to work on because it never was boring. You get a different crowd every single boat. It's only 5 minutes. You don't like this crowd, don't worry, you'll get another one in 5 minutes. I'm like, the ride is a technical marvel. And when you're working at other attractions, you don't get to be on the ride while you're working there. I worked in Men in Black, and it's like being at unload or load at Men in Black. It's cool that you get to wear the suit. I do appreciate the suit. And you know, pretend to be cool and put sunglasses on or whatever, but you're not on the ride all day. Jaws, you get to be on the ride. Like, that's pretty fun. You're part of the ride. You're part of the show. And, you know, I enjoyed, you know, making it my own. Confrontation, it's the same thing, but it also kind of was boring. There's not really good dialogue for Confrontation. It's just a whole lot of helicopter, turn off your light. Oh no, it won't stop. Look at that. And then you sit down. Like, it was mandated. You have to sit down for the end, for the little drop part. It's like, he's dropping the tram. So that was a little boring, but right. Jaws, you're shooting sharks with a grenade launcher. I was also a skipper at Jungle Cruise, but they had just got rid of the guns like the month before I joined. And I was like, oh, but I wanted to shoot the hippos. I thought that was the coolest thing. When I joined, they changed the spiel to like, hey, scare the hippos away by wiggling your ears. Everyone wiggle your ears. There was just a holster sitting there with nothing in it. So Jaws was fun. Back to the Future was just the nostalgia of being in Back to the Future was amazing. Like, that was my favorite attraction growing up. But also it was kind of terrifying walking between the two theaters to go to the break area in the back, and you could see underneath all of the motion bases, just the smell of like burning hydraulic fluid and dust mixing together. I wouldn't say it ruins the magic, but it makes me worry at like, how is that attraction still there today as the Simpsons ride? It was in terrible shape in 2001, like absolutely terrible shape.
Do you think Horror Nights will happen?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to happen.
That's going to be tough to social distance, though.
It's not going to be great, but it'll probably happen. The what we're seeing now is a test. The virtual lines and the way that they're using the app, and they're like directing people to different attractions by like switching virtual line on and off, is a test to see whether or not they can do that with the Halloween Horror Nights houses. So if June goes well, they're going to keep building, because they've been building the haunted houses. If June doesn't go well, they might not. They might put this off. They might do. Already it's going to be stripped down, but they might do a very stripped down Halloween Horror Nights, or not do it at all. It's really up in the air. I think it's going to happen. I'm like 90-something% sure it's going to happen.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, if they ever got rid of that, that would be a big loss for them, because a lot of people go to that consistently, yearly.
There's a huge piece of the Universal Studios, Florida, the Universal Orlando money. That's like their Christmas. Like when other companies, manufacturers talk about Christmas is like half the year's money. That's what Halloween Horror Nights is to Universal Orlando.
Did you say Mardi Gras too?
No, Mardi Gras is because it's included. Mardi Gras is great for getting the locals to come during it's a slow season, and it gets the locals out, and that's great. And it gets the locals spending when they normally would just go and then leave and not spend money. It gets them buying food and stuff. But the Halloween Horror Nights, it's a whole separate ticket. And they're thinking of doing extra separate ticket events until the pandemic happens. So, you know, not only are they losing money this year, but they're losing years of you know, an after hours NerdCon or whatever they were going to do.
But we're going to end the interview with this. And Alicia, can you tell people where they can find more about you? Just tease the website and also the YouTube channel again for the viewers.
YouTube is Theme Park Stop, and the website is orlandoparkstop.com. And also the podcast is the Park Stop Podcast. See, the Park Stop stays the same. It's the theme or the Orlando that's different. Park Stop Podcast is on iTunes, it's on Stitcher, it's on all the things. And we talk about a lot of what's coming up in the future.